I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
John Carpenter's They Live is one of those movies that's lived far longer than its box office run ever suggested. Not just as a cult classic, but as a kind of cultural shorthand for how power hides in plain sight. On the surface, it's a scrappy sci-fi about a drifter with magic sunglasses who stumbles into a conspiracy, but underneath it's about labor, media, and the illusion of choice in a system that wants you asleep. The funny thing is, the film is just as relevant now as it was in 1988, maybe even more so. But is They Live really a timeless critique of capitalism, or have we just learned to see ourselves in its reflection? They Live didn't start out as some big Hollywood sci-fi, came from this little weird short story in the 60s called 8 O'Clock in the Morning, where a guy suddenly realizes aliens have brainwashed humanity into obedience. Carpenter takes that core idea and turns it into something way more blue-collar in Reagan era, a world where the billboards, magazines, and even the TV news are all secretly screaming, obey, and consume. It wasn't subtle, but that was the point. By the late 80s, America was so drowned in ads and greed that it barely felt like fiction, and that's the seed of the film. Paranoia reframed his working-class anger. Which makes sense when you look at Carpenter himself. By then he had already proven he could do horror and sci-fi with Halloween, The Thing, and Escape from New York. But instead of going back to Kurt Russell, he takes a left turn and casts a pro wrestler, Roddy Piper. Carpenter thought Piper had this unique mix of toughness and vulnerability, the kind of guy who looked like he'd actually work construction one day and save the world the next. Pair him with Keith David, who grounds every scene with that unshakable dignity, and suddenly you've got one of the most unlikely but perfect duos in genre cinema. Their alley fight alone is legendary, it goes on forever, it's ridiculous, but it's also one of the purest expressions of what Carpenter was doing, making spectacle out of stubbornness. And the way he shoots it ties all of it together. Most of the film looks like street-level realism, almost flat and unglamorous. Which makes sense, it's a story about noticing what's already in front of you. But then the glasses come on, and suddenly the world turns into stark black and white, plastered with commands like obey and consume and bolt Helvetica. It feels like propaganda turned into art, part Orwell, part Warhol. Add Carpenter's dragging bluesy score over it all, and you get the sense of a city that's both alive and decaying, hypnotic and hostile at the same time. It's not just style for style's sake, it's what makes They Live stick in your head decades later. When it first came out, They Live had a pretty mixed reception. Some fans loved the straight-up sci-fi absurdity, while others dismissed it as a cheesy action flick with the wrestler in the lead. Critics now tend to appreciate it a lot more, seeing it as a sharp satirical time capsule of the Reagan era, and a commentary on consumer culture that's somehow grown even more relevant. Personally, I really enjoyed the film, and I can't help but think that if I had watched it as a kid, I probably would have made a bunch of cringy jokes or memes about it. That said, I've always loved 50s and 60s sci-fi, which is part of why this movie resonates for me. Those classic influences, the pulp aesthetics, and even the long patient shots that modern films rarely give you. I can definitely see why a new viewer might just shrug, thinking it's slow, Roddy Piper is a joke, and the aliens look silly, or that even the message is too blunt. But honestly, I think all of those are more like a skill issue. If you can't roll with the pacing, tone, and style, it's on you. For the rest of the video, there will be spoilers, so if you haven't seen it, go watch it and come back. They Live kicks off with John, a wandering drifter in Los Angeles, stumbling into the city's invisible war between humans and alien overlords disguised as humans. From the start, Carpenter sets up this world of economic despair and social alienation, not just as a background, but as the fuel for the satire. The early scenes, from John finding work to meeting Frank and the shantytown community led by Gilbert, aren't just exposition, they show the kind of everyday people who actually notice when the world is off-kilter. The TV broadcast hack and the hidden gospel recording are little narrative spikes, moments where Carpenter starts teasing the glasses reveal the truth mechanic, layering suspense over absurdity. Even the destruction of the church and shantytown, which could be dismissed as pulp spectacle, lands because it's framed as a systematic oppression hitting the most vulnerable, a detail that makes the story sharper than it first appears. And then the sunglasses, the visual metaphor hits like a punch. Suddenly the world is black and white, propaganda screams at you, and the aliens' bug-eyed design is revealed. Fun fact, Carpenter originally wanted the aliens to be even more grotesque, and imagining that would have turned this into something darker, but honestly the slightly goofy alien faces make the satire bite even harder. Then we hit the centerpiece, John discovering the aliens in everyday spaces, leading up to the infamous Roddy Piper vs. Keith David fight. This fight is legendary not just for its sheer length, it's basically a 6-minute masterclass in stubborn, sweaty determination, but because it captures the film's punk energy. Every punch feels personal, ridiculous, and awesome at the same time. You can almost hear the Misfits' Die Die My Darling playing in the background if you close your eyes. Piper's John is peak Roddy, part tough guy, action hero, part what the hell is even happening everyman. And honestly, he's so good here it makes the rest of the movie land. He carries the absurdity while making it believable. Meanwhile, the aliens' technology, wristwatch teleportation, surveillance drones, and their media signal turn simple settings like a supermarket or a bank into paranoid gauntlets. That's a big part of why the film works. It takes everyday life and turns it into a side of revelation, horror, and comedy all at once. The final act leans into full-on pulp spectacle and social commentary. John and Frank infiltrating Cable 54's alien headquarters, the rooftop transmitter shutdown, and Holly's betrayal all blend tension with Carpenter's signature humor. The pacing here is deliberate. Those long shots of John and Frank sneaking through corridors, or even just John walking through the streets earlier, feel slow in today's blockbuster sense, but they give the world texture and weight. Destroying the transmitter isn't just an action beat, it's a literal unveiling of the truth, with the final middle finger moment serving as a perfect encapsulation of Carpenter's tone, defiant, sardonic, and a little ridiculous. And of course, there's the underlying joke that if this was a modern film, someone would roll their eyes at the aliens, goofy faces, or Piper's wrestling chops. But that's exactly the point. The film leans into that cheesiness while giving it heart, commentary, and style. John may be a drifter, but by the end he's stubborn, resourceful, and somehow the most effortlessly cool guy to ever wear sunglasses. Even though They Lived often gets called heavy-handed, I don't really see that as a criticism. Sometimes being blunt with your messaging isn't just effective, it's necessary, especially now when the film feels more relevant than it did in the late 80s. There's this idea that people have that once you're aware of a social issue, you don't need more art that reminds you of it, or that the only way it can be worthwhile is if it presents the message in some new, flashy way. But that's a pretty ignorant way of thinking, because repetition and directness are exactly what can make a message stick, not just for the general public, but even for people who already consider themselves well-versed. What makes the movie special for me is that beyond its commentary, it also feels like a throwback to the sci-fi of the 50s and 60s that I loved. Gritty, pulpy, and unafraid to linger on slower, quieter moments, like the long opening stretch of Piper just wandering through the city. It's that mix of pulp nostalgia, social bite, and Carpenter's stripped-down direction that makes They Live not just a cult classic, but a film I think everyone should experience at least once. With all that being said, I'm curious what you guys have to say. What do you think about They Live? Do you think it still holds up today? What is your favorite part of the film? Outside of its messaging, do you find it endearing? I feel like this movie is the blend of a lot of things I enjoyed growing up, so it's sort of impossible for me to hate. That being said, thanks for making it until the end of the video. If you enjoyed, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Here at Inner Spiral, we cover the games, shows, and movies we all love, so be sure to join us and I'll see you next time in the Spiral.